Gathering the Nations with Jessica Arianes.
Here we go. Shalom, everybody. Just making sure that we're live and broadcasting and that y'all can hear me. Welcome. All right. So in this presentation titled A Message to the Assembly, I will unmask this so-called revival of Christianity that's rising currently in America for what it truly is, a call to reinstate civic religion. For those that don't know, civic religion is a term used to describe when basically symbols, language, and rituals of religion are merged with political identity, so that allegiance to the state is given a sacred or divine character. It is not covenant. It's not covenant. It's not covenant. It's not based on faith with Yahweh. It's not relationship with Yahweh. In fact, it is religion being used as a tool of politics. Essentially, it's a political contract that binds people together under a nation, constitution, or a ruler. Now, the God language that's used in these contracts, for example, under God or manifest destiny, gives the appearance of holiness, but the principle is not Yahweh. Rather, it's the state and its agents of darkness. This makes it a pseudo-covenant because the people's allegiance is not sworn to Yahweh's Torah, his jurisprudence, neither is it to Yahusha as king or sovereign, but to a political order. Now, it's important to note that Yahuwah's covenant demands exclusive loyalty. You shall have no other gods before me. Exodus chapter 20, verse 3. Civic religion violates this by contracting allegiance to many gods, national ideals, emperors, political systems. Rome did this with the imperial cult. America does it with constitutional oaths. These began and stand apart from Yahuwah's commandments. Now, in biblical imagery, this is fornication, also adultery. It's breaking covenant with Yahweh to form other binding alliances. You can find references in Hosea, Ezekiel 16, and Revelation 17. So basically, civil religion seduces by appearing godly, but divorces from covenant. By substitution, political loyalty for covenant obedience. It leaves people with the appearance of legitimacy, but no true authority from Yahweh. All right, let's see if I can share my notes with you all. And let's see, absolutely. All right, let's begin. Now we're talking specifically about civic religion, and it's imperative that we beware of those pushing revival as a return to Christian national ethics. This false call is a deliberate attempt to draw Yahuwah's people back into a substitutionary system of death. From Rome to modern America, Christianity has often functioned as a tool of empire, a harlot bound to the beast, legitimizing worldly power instead of proclaiming Yahusha's kingdom. Do not be deceived, beloved. We are at war, and we are at war not with flesh and blood, but with principalities and rulers in high places. And these principalities are religion. It's a religious whore of Babylon. She fornicates with the arm of the flesh. And I also want to remind you that we are Israel by covenant, not by politics or nations, but by the redemptive work of Yahusha and by the power of the Ruach. Now, I'm not sure if y'all can see my screen. Hopefully you can. Let me get, can y'all see the notes? I want to make sure that you get my notes. Give me just a second while I adjust. All right, there we go. So y'all can see that, just making sure. And I believe that this is an extremely important message for the assembly, for the true assembly of Yahweh, especially given all the things that are going on in the world today and the call to this national revival. Now, I don't know why. I think I can just, give me a second. It's not letting me go back. Oh, you know why? I'm sharing over here. Hold on just a second. Okay, here we go. All right, so just checking, you can see my screen. All right, so first and foremost, to be wary of those pushing this revival as a return to Christian national ethics. This is a false claim, beloved. It's a deliberate attempt to draw Yahuwah's people back into a substitutionary system of death. And like I mentioned earlier, we see that this established in Rome and it has become infiltrated in modern America. Christianity has always functioned as a tool of empire, a harlot bound to the beast, legitimizing worldly power instead of proclaiming Yahusha's kingdom. Do not be deceived, beloved. We are at war. And the war, again, as I mentioned, is with this spirit of religion, not flesh and blood. All right, I don't know why I keep losing my screen over here. Give me just a second. Here we go. All right. Are we on the right one? Yes. All right, so regarding civic religion, history shows that political powers and legal frameworks have always been used to legitimize worldly rule. I'm sorry, I have my braces in. Colonialism by nature is the domination of people and land by foreign powers, driven by arrogance and the presumption of superiority. It means extending and maintaining political, economic, social, and cultural control over a territory and its people. Colonial powers acted in their own interests, convinced of their own superiority. This is also known in Machiavellian politics, cunning, duplicity, and the ruthless pursuit of control. Now, the term Machiavellian itself describes politics ruled by deceit and bad faith, derived from Machiavelli's teaching that power must be acquired and maintained by any means. The end of the British Mandate and the creation of a sovereign state in 1948 demonstrates how politics reshapes both identity and territory. Now, on May 14th, 1948, Britain ended its colonial mandate over Palestine. And on that same day, the State of Israel was declared. Why? For power and strategic maneuvering. This was a political ploy. It was not prophetic covenant fulfillment, but nation building under colonial legacy. Now, this is the colonial legacy is basically when a colony transitions into a new nation, yet still carries the political, legal, and cultural structures imposed by the colonial power. As a result, they're able to place puppets in positions of power. And this is what gives Satan the locus of authority to rule from a specific region, a location, and in this case, Jerusalem. The state of Israel is Satan's locus of power. It is his seat of influence where he holds de facto authority, a rule exercised by force, appearance, or manipulation, but without lawful right. It is an illegitimate throne projecting counterfeit legitimacy. Now, in the Sefer of our covenant, this often takes shape in political rule, false religion, and systems that mimic covenant authority while opposing Yahweh. Now, each of the three major religions has been drawn into this locus of false authority at different points in history, and we'll look at them. Now, again, I just want to make sure that we're on the right screen here. I don't think we are. There we go. Just a second. All right, here we go. All right, so I think we're on screen 7. Bear with me. I'm working a bunch of different screens here. All right, Christianity and Catholicism. We are going to look at the 3 major powers that have been bound to covenant with what I believe is Satan, and how they are part of his locus of authority. Now, those who have been called out by Yahusha are a covenant assembly, not a state religion. However, Christianity as an institution was birthed out of Rome under the banner of the Universal Catholic Church, a deliberate attempt to replace the true covenant assembly of Yahusha. Now, from this Roman root, countless branches of Christianity would later spread. Islam would follow after, and only later did Judaism take shape in its modern form, once Israel was recast as a national identity. Now, the Roman Catholic Church traces its institutional roots to the late 1st to 4th centuries. And by the 4th century, Rome institutionalized Christianity under Constantine. This shift married the faith to imperial power, making the church itself a political apparatus, a locus where Satan could masquerade as light. And modern Christianity often functions today under state frameworks, such as 501c3s in the US, tying spiritual authority to political legitimacy. Islam arose in the 7th century, claiming Abrahamic roots and the authority of prophecy. The Quran and the Islamic community solidified during that century. Its rapid expansion was tied directly to political conquest, the caliphate system. This fused religion and state into one power structure, establishing a lasting political religious bloc, a prime locus of authority where submission is demanded by law, again, not covenant faith. Now, Judaism. Ancient Israel's jurisprudence under kings, priests, and the temple and the Torah was destroyed with the fall of Jerusalem in 70 CE. Rabbinic Judaism grew afterwards based on oral tradition and synagogue structure. But the national identity of Judaism, as we think of it now, that is a religion distinct from the covenant assembly and tied to a national state called Israel, did not emerge until the late 19th or 20th century with Zionism, culminating in the State of Israel in 1948. The covenant people have always been called to remain separate. Exodus 23:32, Leviticus 20:26. Yet political alliances with Babylon, Rome, etc., compromised Israel's identity. Post-exilic rabbinic systems hardened into legalistic frameworks that sometimes placed human authority above Yahuwah's Torah. You can find that in Mark chapter 7, verses 8 through 9. This created a religious seat of power vulnerable to political manipulation. So remember, we have 3 particular systems of religion that have been birthed from Rome, and that would start with the Catholic Church, which is basically interpreted as universal, and that would become many branches of Christianity. That was birthed first. Okay, then we have Islam that came second, and then finally Judaism as we know it today was third, not primary. So we're talking about Satan's locus of authority. This is a political, religious seat where counterfeit rule is exercised. Catholicism, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism each became entangled with political power, giving him footholds to project a global false legitimacy and reshape covenant identity into something national, institutional, or imperial. Each became, in some measure, a substitutionary system, a place where Satan could exploit the appearance of divine authority to control and manipulate nations and their people. Christianity tied the assembly to Athens and Rome, and later state power. Islam was born as a fusion of religious claim and political conquest. Judaism tied the false identity of rabbinic orthodoxy while denying Yahusha and the nation of Israel perpetrating under the political arm of power. Those who now occupy the land have been shaped by war, displacement, and trauma. Their original identities tied to European cultures were largely erased, leaving people vulnerable to exploitation and manipulation by promises of land, identity, and a hopeful future. They have been given a false status as Yahuwah's chosen, yet without a call to return to the covenant, a place of prominence among the nations that rests on illusion rather than on the completed work of Yahusha. This is important because modern Israel has been seated among the United Nations. She has bound herself in alliances with many states, its strongest ally being America. Yet these political covenants stand in direct contrast to Yahuwah's command that his people make no covenant with foreign nations or their gods. Exodus 23:32, Deuteronomy 7:2. Now, there was and even currently is a gathering of true covenant Israel. This began, in my opinion, about 20 years ago, and we were being gathered not to a land, but to the covenant, to the commandments, and back to Yahuwah, signaling the final stage of Yahusha's work now brought to completion. Today, the most influential Christian movements promote this false claim that Israel was restored in 1948 when world powers, specifically Britain, remember colonialism and Machiavelli's rule of governing through colonialism and the perfecting of that ploy. So Britain was very instrumental, as well as America, the UN, and Zionist factions. All of them engineered the establishment of a city-state. Now, adherents of national Christianity advance Satan's agenda by indoctrinating their followers to pledge allegiance to political Israel and to political systems at large. By doing so, they attempt to strip away the true identity of Israel, the identity of those who keep the commandments and give testimony to Yahusha. National Christianity is an American corporation under the 501c3 and 501c4 arm. Christianity is a puppet system that feigns the true gospel of the kingdom, not the true called out assembly of Yahusha governed by the Ruach and Emeth, or spirit and truth. Christianity's legitimacy is drawn from Athenian law and Roman imperium, not covenant or Yah's jurisprudence, that is the Torah, the law, and the prophets. Now, Athenian law was founded and rooted in philosophy. Men like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle tied law to questions of justice, virtue, and reason, making the courts and what they called at that time, before it was used as a religious term, the ecclesia of Athens, a direct fusion of law and philosophy, which now makes sense when Paul's rebuke to the Galatians is, "O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you that you should not obey the truth?" Galatians 3:1. And his warning, "See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deceit, according to human laws, human traditions, according to the element principles of the world, and not according to the Messiah." In Colossians 2:8, this points to the influence of the Athenian law being established under philosopher or philosophical law. Now, much like the Athenians who shaped judicial authority in the world, the Roman Imperium was born of human ambition and the politics of men. The Imperium would soon replace Ruach-inspired executive power with a force of military might. The judicial authority, Yahuwah's jurisprudence was displayed by man's law, was replaced by man's law, and justice was torn from the covenant and handed to the vicar of Rome. From this seat of false authority, both Christianity and Islam emerged. At the same time, many religious institutions operated within legal and corporate frameworks that blunt people's relationships with Yahweh through the Ruach. This leaves his people with no true power of authority, only the appearance of it. So it's important for us to remain separate. We are in a covenant relationship and have a covenant identity. Again, this is separate from political identity. In this particular hour, we must stand fast, hold to the teachings and the call of Yahusha above any institution that seeks earthly validation. Many of us were called out of the religious harlot as the prophetic fulfillment of Yahusha's return, even as they have perpetrated against us that those who were called out of European territories or other territories and brought back into the land as the nation of Israel. So we see they were not called to return to the covenant, even as we have been called to return to the covenant. And again, this is the prophetic fulfillment of the gathering of Israel. Now, this harlot, who is this harlot that we have come out of? We heard the call, come out of her, my people. This is the religious systems of this world, whether it was Christianity or any other sect of Christianity, whether it was Catholicism, Buddhism, regardless, it is the system of religion, and it is part of the harlot that we were called out of. The harlot is, in fact, the perfect union of civic religion. For though she claims to be under God, in reality, she is divorced from covenant with Yahweh. The great prostitute with no covenant headship, who wears the crown of civic religion. She is politically contracted to many gods, many husbands, many lovers. The whore seduces then and intoxicates men with a lust for power, a power taken from the blood of the saints. Now, here's the verse, and you have to just be patient and bear with me. I'm trying to make sure that you can see my notes as well as over here and my notes. So it's extremely small, but if you read here, it says Revelation 17:4-6. Let me just read the screen over here. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. She held in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her head, a mysterious name was written, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I could see that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and with the witness of Yahusha. She rides a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. In Revelation 17:8-10, it says that this beast was and is no more, but is about to come up out of the abyss and go into destruction. So this beast was, is not, but yet will be. This reminds me of Kamala Harris's quote, right? The 7 heads are 7 mountains. All right, now let's look into this. And again, we're looking at Satan's locus of authority. And then we're also looking at this harlot system, otherwise known as religion, that began with and even perpetrated through Catholicism or through Rome and Athenian philosophical law. We have 2 branches here. We have judicial authority and executive power. The Athenian law rests in judicial authority, that is to give a commanding word or to mediate, establish laws. And then we have the Roman Imperium, which is the executive branch of power, which is also military might. Both of these are counterfeit to the authority, the power and the authority that was vested to Yahusha, whom he then gave to his delegates. That is the apostolic order. He gave them both his word, which would then be judicial authority, to speak a word and to give a command. The power of his word has commanding force. And then we see that and that was in Matthew 18. Then he gave in Matthew, and I think it's John 20:18-20, he gives executive power, and it's by giving the Ruach. So we see this counterfeit within the political systems of this world. Now, the woman in the verse we just read in Revelation 17:4-6, The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. Now, purple is the illusion of rule. However, scarlet is her true identity, as it is in bloodshed and sin, right? The scarlet sin. This is the counterfeit kingship and false priesthood, a seductive power system dressed in the colors of both majesty and rebellion. Now, remember, she was adorned with gold, which speaks of the illusion of her glory as an eternal element. Now, this shows how the earth's resources have been plundered. Corrupt wealth has been used to control and deceive nations. Then she had precious stones, and these precious stones point to counterfeit peoples, identities, and ethnicities that she calls her children. A copy of the 12 covenant stones on Israel's priestly breastplate found in Exodus 28:17-21. Yahuwah's stones marked his tribes, but the harlot's stones mark nations built through conquest and lies. Pearls stand for treasures taken by exploitation, a fake version of Yahuwah's pearl of great prize. And pearls stand also for treasures taken, pearls also are symbolic of wisdom. And so we see that through the wisdom of men, nations have developed, right? We see that people have governed with this false wisdom. And if you do some research, you'll find that Satan, or this Halal ben Shakar, Lucifer, who fell from his position of authority and influence, once held perfect wisdom, but in his fallen state, this wisdom is a corrupt wisdom used to exploit. Okay. In Matthew 13:45-46, we are told that the true pearl is the kingdom, not the stolen wealth of oppression that has been governed by man's wisdom. All right, so she also held in her hand a golden cup of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. Again, tying back to her true nature of fornication. And again, in the Sefer of our covenant, we are told implicitly that a harlot or a prostitute is one that does not have a husband. In fact, she has in her own mind a liberty to pursue men, to seduce men for profit or for gain. So this is the nature of the beast. And on her forehead, or the harlot who rides the beast, and on her forehead a mysterious name was written: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth. And then he says, John says, or Yahuchanan says, I could see that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and witnesses for Yahusha. She rides a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. And in the name of gods, we know that men have plundered the earth, its resources, and its people, becoming wealthy through trade and human trafficking. So that ties into her sexual immorality or her infidelity, as well as her becoming the mother of Babylon, the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth. And then it says that she rides the scarlet beast, which means her authority to rule comes through fornication with this beast. This is adultery and idolatry expressed in countless compacts and covenants that she has made with men to birth these nations. Now, in Revelation chapter 17, verses 8-10, the beast was and is no more, but is about to come up out of the abyss and go into destruction. Now, the angel tells Yahuchanan that these 7 heads are 7 mountains. Now, religion provides rulers. It's important to note we're going to talk about legitimacy here. So how are rulers legitimized? Religion, initially, as it was born, provided rulers with legitimacy. This is a notion that began with Rome. The city of 7 hills, and we'll talk about them in detail, that is the Aventine, the Calian, the Capitoline, the Esquiline, the Palatine, the Quirinal, and the Verminal. All 7 of them, from these hills, Rome expanded into the greatest empire of the ancient world. So let's talk about the two most influential, starting first with the Palatine Hill. Now, this was the seat of rule. This is where Romulus was said to have founded Rome in the 8th century BCE. This became the residential hill of emperors, the Empire of Rome, or the Imperium. Now, the Palatine embodies sovereignty and kingship. Whoever ruled from here was the head of Rome, and by extension, the empire. Now, don't be deceived. Side note, don't be fooled, says beloved. Rome is not the locus of authority, although it is a location of authority for Satan. It is not the central locus of authority. Israel is, Jerusalem is. But however, Rome came first, then Islam, and then Judaism, or national Israel. And again, it's through this system that he is able to harness his illegitimate power, his pseudo power, or and act as an agent of rule or power to have influence over these nations. So it's not Rome. Rome is a part of his locus, but it is not the central focus. So now let's talk about the Capitoline. Now remember, these are the 7 hills that were present in Rome. And the Capitoline was a more religious center. So you can see the two, one being political, the Palatine Hill, and then you have the Capitoline, which was the religious center that served as Rome's capital, where law, religion, and state ritual converged to symbolize covenant and divine sanction of authority. Control of this hill meant control of Rome's sacred legitimacy. So control of the Palatine Hill, okay, whoever controlled the Palatine Hill controlled the government, and whoever controlled the Capitoline Hill controlled Rome's legitimacy by religion. And when you think about our Capitol Hill, when you think about how the U.S. or how America was founded, it fits right into this pattern here. So we see sovereignty and kingship. We see emperors being born from this type of sacred legitimacy. Now, in the Capitoline Hill, or upon the Capitoline Hill, was the temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, and that name is extremely important, as Rome's chief god was central. Victorious generals would parade there in triumph, dedicating spoils to Jupiter, showing that Rome's wars were sanctioned by their gods. In politics, the Capitoline Hill was home to the Tabularium, which is also known as the state archives, and other key state buildings. Now, it's interesting that the tabula rasa, or the tabularum, meaning a tablet, this was their sacred tablet, where they would keep record of debt and other legal forms. And then it was there in this Capitoline religious center that they kept their archives, not in the seat of rule or the Palatine Hill. And this is, again, it ties into legitimacy. Now, both the Capitoline Hill and Palatine became the centers of religion and government. There were 3 ruling bodies. You have the Senate, which is the origin. You have the assemblies, which is an active voice. And then you have the emperor, or the imperium, which would then be known as the manifest power. This was a model of authority that was later mirrored in the theological trinity as framed under the imperial church. You have Senate, and the counterfeit is the Senate. The true source would be the Father, right? You have the the emperor, which is the counterfeit. The true source of legitimacy would be the Son, visible authority. And then you have the assembly, the Athenian, the ecclesia, that's what they call it, the ecclesia. This was the active presence. Now, the counterfeit is the assembly, or the ecclesia. The true source of active presence is the ruach. So this is where we get that Trinitarian doctrine. It came from Rome, and it's hidden. This is it. It's really them perpetrating that. It is basically Senate, emperor, and assembly, the ecclesia, the Athenian ecclesia. Now, and of course, that's ecclesia is a Greek word that was Athenian, but they are one and the same. They're two wings of the same bird. Now, all 7 hills housed temples from which the emperor was worshipped as divine. Now, remember, the emperor is the counterfeit for the son, an illegitimate son of Rome, or a legitimate son of Rome, but an illegitimate son. And so he has no divine right to rule. He has perpetrated. This is counterfeit. Now, this is Rome we're talking about. Now we're going to look at all the other hills here. There are 5 remaining. So those were the 2 main hills. Again, you have civic and you have religious, both of them combined in order to legitimize. So we'll look at the Aventine. Now this was, and then you can do some more research, but I'm just giving you a basic summary. The Aventine was known where the people would converge, come together, and celebrate their fertility gods. So the Aventine was known for fertility cults and the people. And then you're going to see all of this intermingled or blended into modern religion. All religion will have some element of these influences. So the people, fertility cults. Then you have the Chilean, which was a power and was known for power and prestige. Both were displayed there through luxury and patronage, aristocracy, wealth. They were known for lavish houses, gardens. And what's interesting is that it would be here that Christian churches would be established first, amongst the luxury and the aristocracy and the wealth, and amongst the gardens and the lavish houses. And then you have the Esquiline, which was also known for its extravagance, but mostly because Nero's palace was located there. And then you have the Quirinal, which was the administrative district. It was associated with the god Quirinus, the deified Romulus, Rome's founder god. Now, the Quirinal later became known as an important center of state religion and was connected with courts and assemblies and legal proceedings. Then you have the Viminal. The Viminal, which was the smallest of Rome's 7 hills, became known for their baths and their Diocletian and the barracks of the urban cohorts. Politically, it represented the emperor's control over daily life through public amenities and law enforcement. Leisure provided as imperial patronage and order maintained by military policing. Yet beneath this display of power, the Viminal was also marked by indulgence and corruption. The baths, beyond hygiene, became centers of prostitution and sexual encounters, including homosexual liaisons that Roman poets openly satirized. Now, the barracks housing Rome's paramilitary cohorts reinforced this culture as brothels clustered nearby and soldiers exploited slaves and prostitutes, both male and female. In Rome's eyes, such acts were not about identity, but about dominance, indulgence, and control. Thus, the Viminal illustrates how Rome bound politics, pleasure, and perversion together, a microcosm of the harlot's cup of abominations, where power, exploitation, and immorality intoxicated both rulers and people. And of course, they've been hiding this from us, making us look here and there and everywhere else. But in reality, it's hidden in plain sight, beloved. Now, Rome inherited the idea from Greece that law and civic order were sacred. The Roman pontifex, now don't forget about the vicar of Rome, and we'll come back to that in just a second, but the Roman pontifex, who was known as the chief priest, and agarus, priests who interpreted omens, tied political decision-making to the gods. No war, election, or major law was valid without priestly sanction. Now, just a side note here. I'd mentioned earlier that I think it was the Viminal where this debauchery took place. Well, this is where the policing came from, where military would rest or settle from war, and they were housed there. And so they became known as the police. And today, if you think about our police here, we see that this is sort of the heart of that construct. Debauchery, unmitigated power, unchecked power. All right, so remember that Rome took the idea from Greece that law and civic order were sacred. Therefore, the pontifex was responsible for giving sanctions, whether it was election or laws or war. Religion was underpinned as the authority of the Senate and magistrates. Now, in imperial Rome, the emperor was both head of state and high priest. That's where we get that word or that term, the Pontifex Maximus. That means head of state and high priest. His rule was legitimized not just by law and armies, but by religion. Worship of the emperor, also known as the imperial cult, was the unifying religious political act of loyalty. Constantine ended persecution and made Christianity, which was at that time Catholicism, the empire's favored faith. The emperor now styled himself as a protector and overseer of the church. Church councils like Nicaea in 325 CE were called and enforced by imperial authority. The old Roman formula, which was one empire, one God, one ruler, was simply rebranded. The papacy carried this forward, claiming to be the vicar of Christ. So the vicar of Christ, although it's rebranded, still stands on the notion that it's one empire, Rome, under God, their God, and one ruler, the imperium. Who is this one ruler? Who is this one God? Now, in Latin, the vicarius means substitute or a substitute representative, one who stands in the place of another. Now, the Pope claimed to be, and still does, claims to be the vicar of Christ, a substitute representative. And as we continue in our studies, we'll learn about all these terms in agency law and the law of administration. So the vicar of Christ, the vicar, or initially he was known as the vicar of Peter, because Peter, in their catechism, is the one whom Yahusha said he would establish his church. So the vicar, in this case, the Pope, believes that he holds both judicial authority and executive power. Again, judicial and spiritual authority on earth as Messiah, on behalf of Messiah. So this parallels the emperor's old role, supreme religious head legitimizing law. But now, under Christian symbolism in the Middle Ages, a forged document, now this is important, take note. In the Middle Ages, a forged document called the Donation of Constantine, it was a forged document, was used to prove that Constantine had handed imperial power to the Pope. Even though forged, it justified papal claims to rule over kings and nations. So remember, it's not about Rome, it's about Jerusalem, and we'll get there in just a second, but it starts in Rome, okay? Satan's throne, or his locus of authority or locus of power, began in Rome. And then it was birthed through the loins of the harlot in the name of religion. And all other religions are simply bastardized. The main ones are Christianity or Catholicism, Islam, and Judaism, modern Judaism, Orthodox Rabbinic Judaism. Now, by the late by the 11th century, popes declared supremacy over all rulers, crowning emperors and excommunicating kings. Okay. So Christianity would become eventually known as, in spiritual ideology, as the Scarlet Beast. Scarlet for the blood of Yahusha, and the robe of royalty twisted into a counterfeit. The beast, remember, she bears 7 heads, symbolizing the great empires that have risen in succession throughout history. And the 10 horns point to a future confederation of rulers who will briefly reign with the 2 beasts, religion and politics, under the dragon's empowerment. 2 beasts, one from the sea, international, one that has spread abroad, and one from the locusts. Now, adorned as the most prominent religion in the world, Christianity holds in her hand the cup of abomination. False gods. What are these abominations? False gods, doctrines of demons, corrupt teachers, preachers, prophets, all who seduce the nations until her followers are drunk on the cultists of Satan. Now, the merging of empire with religion was perfected in the Catholic Church. From her national religion arose, drunk with the blood of the saints, and from her womb was born the 3 systems of political religion. Now, I had already mentioned them: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism as the world knows it. Now, what's interesting, side note, I researched or Googled the statistics of members of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Now, Christianity, although it still retains itself as the most influential religion in the world, Islam is a close second. And when I say close, I'm talking like very close. Islam is rising. Now, we're looking at the union between Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. From their union, or from this union, Islam was born. Now, the many waters mentioned in Revelation 17 represent peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. This is the picture of the harlot's global reach. We know that Islam is striving to rule across borders, cultures, and languages. Now, in the ancient world, waters often symbolized chaos and a restless nation. So this ties in perfectly with Islam. Islam will soon extend the harlot's influence into a global domain, fusing religion with empire, claiming submission to God or Allah while carrying the same cup of abominations. Thus, Greco-Roman civic religion gave birth to Christianity, all forms, Islam, and Judaism. All 3 stand together as successive manifestations of the harlot's power, which is basically empire clothed in religion, religion clothed in empire, and nations drunk with her wine. And that wine is symbolic of power. Now, true Israel has indeed been restored, not to a land ruled by civil religion or political theology, but to her covenant head. True Israel is a virtuous bride who receives her legitimacy from the name of her beloved, her master, Yahusha. She has a name. Her husband has given her a name. This is legitimacy. Our true identity has been restored to us because of the redemptive work of Yahusha. We are currently under siege, beloved. I assure you, as whatever is taking place out there on the world stage is moving towards a national revival to make this nation a nation under the Christian rule or the dogmas or ideologies of religion. This is an attempt to bind the people, to bring people that have come out of her back into political Rome, and to revive what Yahuwah has specifically forbidden. Finally, beloved, I would like to remind you that there are tares among us, and They are mature, even as we are maturing, so the tares are maturing. Their goal or their intent is to sow confusion with their blended syncretic message, tempting and seducing people to return to the way of whoredom that we left behind. But I'd like to charge you in the name of Yahusha to stand firm, to resist the devil. Remember, if you do, he will flee from you. Don't forsake your calling. Do not return to the harlot. Do not bow down to the beast. It is not your ally. Religion is not your ally. It is the cunning enemy of our souls. Remember, we are told to remain set apart. We also know that the kingdom of Yahuwah is not of this world, and the kingdom of Yahusha reigns in us. I truly believe that Yah is doing a mighty work in the midst of his true called out assembly, and that work is to complete the work that Yahusha began. That work that Yahusha began was to establish within his kahal the kingdom of heaven here on earth through his people. We cannot mobilize as true Israel until we have an understanding of judicial authority and executive power. Again, how to wield and utilize his word properly. Jewish prudence. No, jurisprudence, not Jewish prudence, but jurisprudence, that is understanding the nature of his law with the intent that he had by mercy and grace and compassion, bearing the fruits of the Spirit, beloved. That's basically all my slides for tonight. But again, I want to urge you, we are under attack. And when I say we, I'm talking about true covenant Israel, not those who have perpetrated, and again, to no fault of their own. They have been fed a narrative, a false narrative. And this narrative, remember, it's those particular individuals that will usher in the anti-Messiah or the lawless one, the anti-nomios, the one who does not adhere to the law of Yahweh, nor are they bound to his covenant. So these people were restored, but restored to a national identity. They were restored to a land, but they were not restored to covenant. They were not restored by the redemptive work of Yahusha, as they currently deny him. And I'm sure that statistics will show that there's a messianic presence there in Israel, but I'm talking about those who are governing and ruling. And what you see there in that state is you see a power which is counterfeit Ephraim, right? That would be under the presidential head, and all those who come in who do not adhere to Orthodox rabbinics. They are just basically secular Jews. They would then be the counterfeit movement of Ephraim and the 10 northern tribes who have come in. And if you know anything about the initial conflict between the northern and the southern tribes, then you know that at that time, Ephraim was governing as Jeroboam was the first king of the northern tribes, prophesied by Yahweh. And they would, because they represented the bulk of Israel, they would be known as as Israel. And then you had a small group of Judah and Benjamin and some Levitical presence, but they were so small that they were sort of grouped in with Judah as the southern tribes. So you have Ephraim, the northern tribes, which would be known as Israel, and then you have the southern tribes, which would be the priestly presence known as Judah. So you have that same counterfeit presence there today. You have a governing head or political power, which is a counterfeit move of Ephraim, all the mixture of people known and just calling themselves Jews, but they do not adhere to the counterfeit Levitical system that's there, which is the Orthodox presence, the counterfeit priests. So you see this counterfeit. It's a counterfeit. Neither one. The political power was not returned to the Torah, and then the priestly power, or those who came in through Orthodox rabbinics, they did not return to the covenant. So we see both, neither his commandments, his covenant, or his Torah. And even those who claim through orthodoxy to be preaching the Torah, it's a Babylonian, obviously they have other resources, but their main resource is the Babylonian Talmud and the doctrines of men that they have elevated above the simplicity of Yah's word. So we don't see the Torah acting as the legal precedent or the authority to govern in that land. But yet we see that about 20 years ago, there was a massive movement where the Ruach began to quicken people. He began to mobilize people all over the earth, and people were being drawn without representation. People were not preaching a return to anything. People were coming out in droves from various religions, and they were hearing the call to return to their first love, to return to the covenant, to return to the ancient paths. And then today, 20 years later, we see that all the things that are happening on the world stage, and specifically the one most recently where a Christian nationalist, was pushing this Roman, this Greco-Roman agenda, merging. It was part of the same harlot system of religion to merge, and it has to do with legitimacy. It has to do with giving authority or power to those who are representing it, and that would be current heads of state. And so they are losing their legitimacy because this nation was originally founded on Christian morals. And again, Christianity is a religion, it's an organization, it's an institution. It is not a true representation of covenant Israel. Those who have returned to the covenant, who desire his commandments and his law be written upon their hearts, those who keep the commandments and have the testimony of Yahusha, this is Israel. And the dragon is wroth with her and her children. And so the persuasion or the risk that we're facing, and I've seen it in social media where people are rising up in droves, and even those who have claimed to be part of the covenant or the Commonwealth of Israel, saying we are Israel, who keep the Sabbath and keep the feasts, or whatever it is that they think identifies them as Israel, but they are now voicing that we should have, they're saying, let us buy these books and let us return, and I'm going back to church and all the things. And so this again is part of that, the presence of the tares, that syncretism, right? To blend these two. We want nothing to do with it. They are under contract law. The governments and the powers and religions of this world, they are bound by contract. We are bound by covenant fealty. This is important, beloved. And although I presented this in a way that you could follow along, it really was a message that Yah placed on my heart, even as the event took place initially and immediately. The first thing that came to mind was we're under attack. And it's to draw it. Why is that? Why is it so attractive? Because it seems as though this movement is being fueled by power and efficacy, something the assembly has lacked for a very long time. It seems as though the early assembly, the apostolic assembly, by which we are, look up the word apostle. It means a delegate, a legate in Roman terms or in Latin terms. A legate was somebody who received or was entrusted with power and authority in order to perform a command or a commission or a task. Yahusha delegated both the power in heaven and the power on earth. He says, all power and all authority has been given to me. and I give it to you. And he gave them a commission. That commission was to preach the kingdom. And he sent them out. He did not scatter them, beloved. The wicked shepherds scatter. Yahusha was the good shepherd, is the good shepherd. He did not scatter his delegates. He sent them out on a mission. They were commissioned. And now I believe that we are in a season where he's beginning to gather, bringing us back in because the job is done, right? The gospel of the kingdom has been sent out. It has gone out to the ends of the earth. You thought the gospel was simply a message of repentance. No, the gospel is hidden in the people, even as the kingdom and the power of that kingdom of heaven was hidden in Yahusha. So he also, that seed was planted in his people at that time and sent out to proliferate, to grow, and to thrive from generation to generation. And here we are. And a people are being gathered back, returned. He's gathering the nations. He's gathering his harvest, his final end time harvest. And the enemy knows that his influence and his power is waning. He is losing his ability to persuade and to seduce the people, even secular people. They're losing. They have no fealty, no trust. Any relationship that has been damaged by distrust is a relationship doomed to fail. All relationships that are healthy require communication and trust. But specifically when it comes to agency law, fiduciary law, or a fiduciary duty, or a fiduciary in general, that those types of relationship where you have a principal and an agent, that relationship is built on trust. Once there's a breach in the relationship because of mistrust, I can no longer trust you to handle my resources or my funds or to act in my best interest, then you lose, as the agent, you lose legitimacy or authority or power in my eyes. Your words no longer, I don't trust your words. You cheated on me, I don't trust. It's this same idea. And so the enemy knows that his time is short. I believe that what's taking place on the world stage is his one final attempt. It's this final hoorah, right? To get people to reinstate their faith or their belief in a civic religion, so that, again, the governments of this world would give power back to those heads. But we need to stand firm in the face of opposition. We need to have discernment in this hour, ears to hear and eyes to see, beloved. This place is not our home. This world is not our home. Although we are in it, we are not of it. We need to remain prudent. Not to be persuaded by the push and the pull or the popular opinion that's out there, right? Even if we have to stand, and even if we become abrasive in our stance, and I'm not talking about rude or belligerent, I'm saying if our stand goes against the grain, then so be it. We need to have the courage, the courage to stand, to hold fast to the call. So I believe that we are to be encouraged in this hour, not discouraged, that cares about what's going on in the world around us. What's most important is what Yah is doing in us. What's most important is that he is maturing his people, and that maturity will end. And I believe it with all my heart, even as I've been witness to it, that Yah is reinstating. We look at and that was my initial comment, is that we look at the early assembly, right? And those who were sent out, they had executive power and judicial authority. They were able to heal the sick and raise the dead. They were their shadows. People were healed in their shadows, beloved. And it seems as though Yah's people, as that this power and this authority has digressed. I mean, give the example, and I'm going to continue to present on these types of topics. But when we look at the Roman centurion soldier, he came to Yahusha and asked Yahusha to return with him to heal one of his servants. And Yahusha said, sure, I'll go with you. And he says, no, I'm not worthy to have you in my home. Just go ahead and give the command, give a word. That is judicial authority, to give a command, to mediate the law to command it. And so he says, listen, I know what it is to give a command. I have people under me. I say, go here, go there, do this, do that. And they do it. Just give the command. And Yahusha ascribes this to the man as faith, unlike those who were with him. He says, I have not seen this measure of faith before. This man has the right understanding of how faith works. To command, Yahusha said, if you say to this mountain, move, it shall be departed. That is judicial authority, to enforce something. Now, the laws that have been established through the Torah were first established in heaven. That is that binding and loosing power that's mentioned in Matthew 18, 15 through 20. To bind and to loose has to do with executing not only the laws of heaven, but the will of Yahweh on earth as it is in heaven. To bind, to speak it, or to loose a sanction. To enforce a sanction, to loose a sanction. The easiest way to display that is unclean, binding a sanction, clean, loosing a sanction. To have the ability to say clean, unclean, forgiven, unforgiven. The power of life and death is in the tongue, right? Then what does he give to them in John? Now, this is after. That was while he was in the flesh in Matthew 18, 15 through 20. But in John, and I think it's also 18 through 20, but John chapter 20, 18 through 20, he is now in his resurrected form. And up until that point, Yahusha had not commissioned his disciples to preach the good news or the kingdom, which the good news is the kingdom. Read Matthew. It's the kingdom. That's the message, the kingdom. Okay, so he had not commissioned them to go to the nations or to the Gentiles. He said, do not go into the he specifically gave them locusts or locations, locales, and said, don't go to Samaria, don't go here, don't go there, don't go to the nations yet, because he was still in the flesh. He had not received the power that would allow him, not yet, received it. Okay, received it. Not yet the authority to now send his delegates out into the world where a power already existed. That was death. He needed to conquer it first. So while he's in the flesh, he is able to give them the word because he's the word made flesh. So he's able to give them this judicial authority. You command it. If you forgive, they're forgiven, right? Go now, all the things, I command you now to love one another. My commands, this is the command. Okay, so then once he dies and he's resurrected, he comes back and he's amongst his people for about 40 days. More miracles are done. But in John chapter 20, it says that he comes and he says twice, peace, peace, because that's the message of the kingdom, peace. And we're going to actually learn this Thursday. We're going to review this executive power. We already went over binding and loosing, judicial power, and the counterfeit. Remember, if you go, just do some research and research Rome, the Imperium of Rome, not the Roman Empire, which is where the word comes from, but it's Imperium. You'll see that there are two major branches, counterfeit, the kingdom of darkness, beloved. Believe it or not, Satan has been hidden this entire time in politics and religion in plain sight. And through those channels has deceived people, their adherents, into thinking that the agents of darkness is fallen angels, and they're in Tartarus, and they're hidden in the core of the earth, and they're bound in the waters of the firmament, demons and devils, right? And I'm not saying that there aren't influences and powers, but beloved, the true locus of Satan's authority all along, in politics, in contract law, in agency law, in the law of administration, hidden in their contracts and their languages in contract, someplace most people would never look. It's all there, beloved. It's all there. And I'm not saying all, but it's there. You can see him, his presence. And then in international trade, powers and principalities on the earth governing as his representatives, his seed, Satan's seed, to establish his kingdom of darkness, keeping people veiled. And it's a power of death. Now, back to Yahusha. Yahusha's in resurrected form. Now he says, all power and all authority, both in heaven and on earth. That means that he conquered death. So now by the Spirit that raised him from death is now greater than the power. He says, the power working in you is greater than the power that is in this world. That is the power he received on earth. Power over death, life and death. Now he breathes, he says, receive the Ruach. And they receive the executive power, that is the dunamis, the exousia, the power to perform. And the counterfeit, Rome, the Imperium of Rome, the counterfeit, well, their executive power is military. It's force. It's weapons of warfare. It's police, right? That is their executive power to enforce the law, which is their judicial authority. Their judicial authority comes from Roman, Greco-Athenian law. It's interesting that a particular person, again, most recently, who was advocating for this revival, advocating that this America would become a nation under God again and return to its Christian roots. But that particular individual, I heard one of his debates, and several of his debates were a fallacy. They were wrong, just basically wrong, and a twisting of the Torah and the scriptures and the covenant. And in one particular instance, he's talking about how this individual is challenging him as same as I am, saying that we have no business and to take no part in politics. And he counters that by saying that the word for church in the Greek New Testament, the word for church is ekklesia. Be a Berean, beloved. Research the origin, or the etymology of ekklesia. It is Greek, and it was used in Athens to define their assembly of law and order. This was before religion. It was fused into the doctrines of religion, the ekklesia. We are not the Athenian political ekklesia. We are the kahal, the assembly of Yahusha. And he has given to his assembly power and authority over all the power of the earth. That means death and the words of life, to bring in those who hear Shema, beloved. Now, when Yahusha gave to them the Ruach, then he said, remember earlier when he was in the flesh, he said, don't go out to the Gentiles because they are under a power. They are under a covenant, a contract with death. Can violate the will. But then when he's resurrected, he receives the executive exousia power, the power over death, because that's the power of the Ruach that raised him. So now he sends his disciples out and he says, now go out to the nations. That's it. Go to the nations and do what? Peace. There's the covenant of life has been restored. Come into the commonwealth where there's the covenant of life, to open the eyes of the blind, to heal the sick, to raise the dead. Greater work shall you do. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the issues, and I think the most where the enemy is able to seduce most effectively, these braces, to seduce most effectively, is wherever there is a lack or a want, a desperate need for something. And I believe that the desperation is for that power and the authority, that we would display it unto the glory of Yah. But yet we are lacking. The assembly, originally when Yahusha sent them out, again, shadows. They walked by and people were healed. People were coming in the droves, and they weren't coming into a organized religion under Rome. They were not converting people to Catholicism or any other form of political Christianity or Islam or Judaism. It wasn't about religion. It wasn't about an identity that was, the personification, giving the form of religion, wearing a costume, right? The outward appearance. But it was about the conversion of the inner man, the heart being circumcised by the hearing of the word being likened to a sharpened sword, a double-edged sword that removes the fat, the deaf ears being opened to the meat of the gospel. And so what happens? The church begins to lose its power as they are dispersed, not scattered. Israel was scattered, but that was after the exile of Babylon. They came out, and who scattered them? The wicked shepherds, those who called themselves Jews at that time, but were of the synagogues of Satan. The Israel, Ephraim, the 10 northern tribes, they were all scattered. Some were in Egypt, some were in other territories, Corinth. They were scattered. And those who called themselves Jews, they created an assembly, also known as the Sanhedrin. And they refused to let Ephraim come in. So Ephraim settled amongst the Gentiles, specifically, majority of them migrated into Greece. And this is why, again, they begin to put themselves under the Athenian government, which is when Paul is released. When Paul goes out, he's coming up against these democratias. The word kratia is biblical. When he talks about powers and principalities, that word kratia is powers and principalities. Kratia. Demos, again, a Greek word. Demos, meaning people, like demographics, demo, and then kratia, power to the people. Democracy, that's Athenian democracy. Demos kratia. Then you have res republic, or the Republic of Rome, also meaning public, people, the power to the people. And again, this is what is perpetrating as Paul is going out and calling Israel at that time back into covenant, back under the hegemony of Yahuwah and the covenant, right? To return to the jurisprudence, the study and the understanding, the efficacy of Yah's law and the power of forgiveness from sin. And what's happening at that time? Again, Yahusha sends out his Talmudim, his disciples. They go out and they have a commission, but they are equipped. They have the commanding power of his word and the executive power of his ruach to raise the dead, to bring them, executive power, to bring them out of the covenant that they were bound to because of sin. By saying simply, your sins are forgiven, but with executive power to restore not just Israel, because salvation comes through Judah, it comes through Israel. But truly, if we understand the succession of things, Israel was the northern tribes. At the end, Israel is the northern tribes. Judah is Judah, Israel is Israel. So who is Israel? And Israel, at the time that Yahusha was on the scene, Israel had been scattered, but because of the false priesthood, nepotism, cronyism, those false Jews, the synagogue of Satan, right? You have Pharisees and Sadducees that make up the Sanhedrin, the assembly, but they had prostituted Jerusalem to Rome, making her a client of Rome's. They had no executive power, and only within a small locus of authority, Rome allowed them to demonstrate judicial authority, which they received from their Talmud, from their Mishnahs, from their rabbinical teachings and their commentaries and their traditions and their writings, but not from the Torah, because they were a counterfeit. And then we see again a counterfeit sovereignty. We have King Herod sitting in a seat, who was a puppet vested by Rome, who allowed Rome to come in, again, giving the illusion of power. But it was fornication, idolatry. And because of this, Israel was scattered. The nations of Israel, the tribes of Israel were scattered all throughout. So when Yahusha comes, he says, I've come to gather the lost sheep that were scattered by the wicked shepherds. He was the good shepherd who gathers. He gathered them unto himself, establishing a kahal, a set apart assembly on the earth so that his kingdom would be demonstrated through them in time. He was the legate, the agent who acted perfectly as a fiduciary entrusted by the principal, Yahweh. And he did his job. He executed perfectly. He did not covet or take anything for himself. He had no place in this world. He maintained the trust, something that didn't initially belong to him, but it was entrusted to him. He faithfully cared for it. That's why he says in the garden, all that you have given to me, entrusted me with, I have been faithful to keep it. And this was the crime going all the way back to Genesis that was committed through covetousness. Life was given to the man. It was entrusted. He was in possession of it. But as an agent, possession does not equal ownership. He did not own that life, and that includes his own will. He didn't own it. He was in possession, but not an owner of it. And he took what didn't belong to him and made himself the principal, the owner. And then he solicited or gave it over to a third party by will. I will eat. I will do what this master says. So now, what happens? Yahusha sends out. He didn't scatter. We're not scattered. We're not lost. Okay, we're supposed to be, that's what we're being quickened to now. That's what's happening now. Yahuwah's word, his commission, it's alive, beloved. We're supposed to be progressing. Okay, not regurgitating the same old stuff, the feast, the Torah, the thing, and have no real power. Where's the power? We're supposed to be maturing. The kingdom's supposed to be advancing through us, beloved. And so what happens? Yahusha sends out this commission. His assembly, his kingdom has now gone forth into the kingdoms of darkness. His kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, it's going to reign. And what happens? All of a sudden, there's this interim, this impasse, this dark ages, right? Something happens, and now the church becomes an organization and a cultus. And people begin to lose efficacy. And then every now and then you see these small little, bursts of revival, or whatever you want to call kingdom authority. But in reality, it was counterfeit, right? It was various Christian denominations popping up with revival in America, people getting healed, a counterfeit. But really, again, it's not sustaining. It's temporal and momentary. It really does seduce and titillate the people and gives them what they think they need to hold on to their faith and their belief. But most adherents don't possess any real form of power. They can't heal, right? They struggle to overcome. They're still being vexed by ideologies of demons or demonology or whatever it is. Their purpose is constantly being thwarted. There's an impasse. There is constant resistance. Most believers don't walk in victory. They only give the appearance on social media or an illusion of victory. And the idea is this: why would Yahusha give power and authority to his disciples to go commission them, and then that commission would all of a sudden just begin to wane and to wax? Like, why is that power just dwindling? For a reason. Okay, everything's on track, beloved. Yah's on time. The reason was there needed to be that space, right? That space between then and now was to hide his people. The earth hides her, right? To hide his people for a time and a season. Everything appointed time. It says, when will you restore the kingdom? The appointed time. Yah's appointed time that only Yah knows. That's the, not chronos, chronology, but kairos, a moment in time, a kairos moment. When Satan took Yahusha up to the high places and said, see all the nations and its glory, it has been given to me. If you bow down and worship me, I will give them to you. It says that Satan took Yahusha to those high places in a moment of time. Not chronos. That means that those nations weren't glorified as his yet, but they would be, meaning that there would be a time appointed where he would receive. This is important. Go look it up. Chronos and kairos, in a moment of time. He wasn't speaking of the small, nations that were being established at that time that Yahusha was on the scene. What was it, like Greece and Rome, Persia? He was saying, this is my glory, and it will one day come to fruition, and its glory will be mine, and I can give it. He specifically says, and I think it's in Matthew 7, Mark 7, something like that, 2 gospels. And he says, they've been entrusted to me. I've received delegated authority, and I can give them to whomever I choose. They're my kingdoms, and I give them. Bow down and worship me. Yahusha obviously resists and overcomes because he is a faithful Jew. What is it? Fiduciary, right? Fiduciary. He is faithful. He doesn't have he resists the desire to covet what is not his. So he endures. So that means that moment in time where Satan's nations, his kingdoms, would have to come to fruition first. And everything that's been happening, it's not Yah stalling. It's not because his word does not have power. It's not because his assembly is lacking. It's not because he's forsaken us, but because a moment in time. Yahuwah, I believe, has allowed for this time so that Satan, he has limited authority, beloved. He is not omnipotent. He's not all powerful. He's a fallen creature, something created. And even as we were created to be immortal, and in Yahusha will be restored to that status, but in our fallen state, in transgression, we become mortal. That means limited. We expire, and everything in this world expires, beloved. So that means that Satan, in his fallen state will expire. He has an appointed time. His time is short. So Yah allowed all of his energy and his resource throughout time to be put into his desires to raise a throne above the throne of Yah, or to attempt to, right? Or to set himself on the hill, on Zion, on the mountain, or at least to attempt to in this world. And now that his time is waxing, beloved, now that his time is waning, now that his influence is becoming weaker, he's dying. He's a dead star. He's the star he's dying. His light is diminishing. It's not increasing, I assure you. And now is a perfect time. It makes sense to me that Yah would then quicken his assembly and say, now greater works shall you do. Greater works. And we shall overthrow the powers of darkness. It is no longer about the commission to seek and save, right? The message has gone out. We are the message. We are the kingdom message. The kingdom message is supposed to be in us, beloved. We are ambassadors, and we're supposed to carry that message. Yah is doing something. And we see this big hurrah to return back to civic religion was never of Yahweh. True Israel, not those who occupy the land under a political contract, as a political identity. But true Israel has been called to return to covenant relationship, because they testify, they become the testimony of the redemptive work of Yahusha. You, beloved, we are the testimony, the redemption, and he will receive what belongs to him. He will redeem us, beloved. All right. So I know I said a lot there, which I probably should have just presented without my slides. And I don't know why all this technology, I think it'll. I noticed it this time. I don't know how long I was muted, but so we have this Bible study, and usually I present with notes, and we have study guides and homework and things like that. It's so that we can really acclimate to these terms and what Yah is revealing to us in this hour. So I thought I would do something different, and probably should stick to the standard. But I basically tried to give you all a summary in my notes, but I was having to look everywhere else here and there. And so, yeah, with that. Yes, thank you. I think, am I speaking now? I think you all can hear me now. All right, so that's basically it, beloved. Again, go back, refer to the notes. Sorry that it was so choppy. I'm pretty sure that you could at least get what I was trying to say. And just want you to be encouraged. Please, listen, do your best to guard your ear gates, to guard your eye gates, right? Because again, social media, don't think that those who are out there with, hundreds of thousands of subscribers and millions of subscribers, and it looks like they have a lot of activity, all these comments and, who knows what. I assure you that the majority of them are, and I'm talking about out there on IG, out there on TikTok, out there on, pumping their platforms and reels and all these things, just, a lot of information. But I assure you that Satan, remember, the glory of Satan, he gives it to his whomever he chooses. So a lot of those platforms, their subscriber numbers are fake. A lot of them are bots. A lot of them are bots that communicate. A lot of those comments aren't even real people. So I would encourage you not to get involved in arguments and strife, and to really sort of stay in the shadows, stay in the backdrop, right, as we just watch things unfold. But more importantly, some of the terms, although they may be new to you, I would encourage you to at least write them down and do some research of your own. Look up the Roman Imperium. Look up, the beginning of Athenian law and philosophers, Socrates, right? What was his name? I can't think of his name. So many, right? They are the ones that created Athenian law. And in fact, if you go and look at how what their opinion was on women and slaves and children, which we studied also in our Bible studies, you'll see that this is where the idea that women should be silent and all that Paul was coming up against in Corinth, which was located in Athens or in Greece. So all of it makes sense. Paul was contending against the governments and the kingdoms of Satan as he was called to do what? Present and demonstrate the kingdom of heaven. It was his commission. And so he's coming against these democratias and the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. He's coming against these counterfeit systems because he knows that in them is the locus of Satan's authority. Locus meaning location. But it's the seat of Satan. It's in this place where these systems of government, which is an antinomial, it's lawlessness. Christianity, it's a religion. Now, I'm not saying that people that are part of Christian groups or sects, whatever that may be, I'm not saying that the people are they're counterfeit. No, there are many of Yah's people caught up in these counterfeit systems, which is again impotency, right? They have no potency. Yah's word, he said, my word will not return to me void. It has potency, power to perform. And he says, and it will perform what I set it out to do. That's commanding power, beloved. That's the power to perform, to make it come to pass. These churches and organizations and all religions, every now and again, you have these lying signs and wonders where somebody is hallelujah. Most of it is emotionalism. Most of it is, people, all these crazy people just using kinetic energy. Right? They're just using their own psychic energy. The word for soul in the Greek is psychic. Psyche. Psyche is the soul. The suke is the soul. So they're just using psychic power from the soul realm. Again, giving the appearance, but behind the scenes in all of these various religions, you have debauchery. The fiduciary trust has been breached. The relationship has been breached. And you have all this division. Everywhere is division. The spirit of Elohim is echad, is one, is not divided against itself. The kingdom of Satan is divided, which is why Yahusha say a house divided. If I cast out devils by the power of the devil, then Satan is defeated. A house divided cannot stand. Yahuwah's house is not divided, beloved. It's not two parties. Some constituents over here, constituents over there. It's not northern and southern. It's the whole house of Israel restored to a prominent place. And that prominence is not in her own glory, not in political power, not in civic duty. We have no responsibility. Again, it's a violation of the commandment. I adjure you. It is a violation of the commandment of Yahweh. If you truly are Israel, he says you are to make no covenant with foreign nations, neither with the people of the land. They went into Canaan, and he specifically told them, you are not to make a covenant with the people of the land, nor to worship their gods. And after Israel became a nation under Yah, one nation under Yah, then they had foreign relationships, international trade, domestic trade, and international trade, but they were not to make covenants. In other words, they were not to come into political league. We see that the folly of Jeroboam, we see the folly of Solomon, we see the folly of most of the kings, was that they came into covenant
political alliances. And you'll always see, as a result of their allegiance to other nations or their alliances, they bring in their gods. Because it was, I bring in your God and I'm showing you fealty. I'm showing you that you can trust me. This is an indication that we are in a relationship, and that by the power of your God, you will keep your part of the covenant or your contract, and that by the power of my God. Syncretism, blending, political powers. Israel was never created to be a political power. But so that the Jewish, can't say it with the jurisprudence of the kingdom of heaven would flow through Jerusalem, the city, his laws, his commandments, his ordinances, his ways, beloved, that they were supposed to flow through Jerusalem. A presence here on earth, a shadow of the heavenly things, that which is full of substance in heaven. In heaven, where it's not up in a location, but heaven in it, within, right, is a place where Yahuwah's word has power and authority to perform. Let there be, and there was. Commanding power. And there are very few, and I believe, praise Yah, that as we continue to develop in this position, those who have been entrusted, those who have gone through the tests and the trials and have been tried and refined, Yah elects, right? Yah will choose those whom he can trust to receive in this hour judicial authority, commanding power, executive power, the power to raise, to execute his commands, to command and to execute it. This is an invitation. This is why, Yah is put us through the test. He wants to see, can I test you? And I believe that in this hour, his assembly, and although it might be a very small one, a remnant, nonetheless a very effective one. Wouldn't you rather be on the side of efficacy? Or do you want to remain in groups of impotency where men, all they do is give the appearance of power? Don't you actually want to be entrusted with that efficacy? Yes, the church is longing, the assembly is longing for it, which is again why all of this is so seductive, right? So seductive because, again, the particular individuals who have platforms that go out and they argue and contend the kingdom, and it gives the appearance of true representation, and people mistake that representation for efficacy, authority. And people are now, that have been somewhat disillusioned by the Torah movement, they've been wounded and hurt, and then they look at that and they say, they have it, right? It's just this constant vying for your focus and your attention. But I encourage you, beloved, be still. Do not be moved by your emotions, that's what they want, right? Satan needs consent. All right, we're going to call it a night. Angela says, look into case law, Roman Imperium. Oh, thank you. You're reciting my notes. Athenian law, its opinion on slaves, children, and women. We just got this book. She's part of our study group, and we just ordered this book. We're all studying administrative law. Under administrative law, that you're going to find the opinions on slaves, children, and women. Under the Athenian law, she's absolutely right. For Paul's insight, conflict, and commission against the counterfeit system of his time. And again, we are learning these things. We've been learning them for the last couple of years. We're pretty versed in it. And as you can see, the students that participate in the Bible study, you can see Angela's case in point. She's able to articulate these things, and I praise Yah for that. So if you're interested and would like to join the Bible study, let me know. Email me, and I will send you. We're having a study this Thursday. And we'll get you connected. All right, everybody. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Absolutely. We have lots of law books we read from and resources that we get excited about over here. And we study man's laws. We study the laws because that's where it's hidden. That's where Satan has hidden his power. his locus of authority. All right, y'all, I'm going to call it a night. Yah be with you. Again, don't know. Let me see if I can do this. All right. Shalom, everybody. Yah be with you. And if you want to join, just let me know. Email me, and I'll send you the information. So doesn't look like I know how. Let me see. I'm sorry, guys.